Hello, welcome to this giant-sized issue of Sector 2815. I'm Paul Cook, and today we've got a special crossover issue of Sector 2815. We'll be talking to Jake, who is Omega Red on Instagram, and we'll get to him right after this. So again, welcome to Sector 2815. Again, I'm Paul Cook. If this is your first time seeing my channel, make sure you like the video that we have here. Make sure you subscribe, hit that alert button so you're notified whenever we have videos uploaded. And today, I'm really happy to have as my first guest to my channel is Jake, who's coming all the way from the heartland, from Mid-America. He's Omega Red. It's spelled like Reed, but it's Omega Red on Instagram. And
That's spelled like red too. Red
that's
is,
true.
you read something.
That's true. The past tense of read. Good thing. So, first of all, thank you for coming on. You're my first guest, so my first live stream.
Yes.
My everything. So you never forget your first.
I hope not. And thank you very much for having me. I was honored to be asked. And you and I were talking about, before you even started the channel, what it was going to be and what you wanted it to become. And I was very excited to see what type of content you would come up with. So I'm thrilled to be a part of it. Thank you.
Oh, this is my first time with StreamYard, so there's a very high likelihood that this could go off the rails rather quickly from a technological standpoint.
That's awesome. I'm here with you for it then.
I feel like I should have, like warnings you get at theme parks. Like if you have to be this tall to be in my live stream, and please keep your hands and feet inside the live stream at all times.
Well, we'll be careful, but let's see where it goes, huh?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you start, Jake? Tell us a little bit about you, about your comic collection, how you got into comics, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, how much time do you have? So me, I'm from Nebraska. I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, but I also sometimes I think there are some advantages when it comes to comic books as far as like shipping. There's a lot of great sellers all over the country and internationally for that matter. But if you're somebody from the East Coast, shipping from, well, I guess standard shipping is pretty much the same all around, but I feel like I get books a little bit faster. None of them are usually from here when I buy online. Usually it's from California or somewhere up on the northeast, but I tend to, be right in the middle of everything. So shipping usually kind of works out in my favor sometimes. And then also, there's a lot of really good LCSs around here. And some of them I would say are really untapped. There aren't as many people, I guess, in this area. There are still, millions of people in Nebraska too. But I would say that ultimately there are a couple of LCSs that just, you go in there and you just find gems, on a daily if you really have the time. So yeah, I feel pretty fortunate there. I had, let's see, as far as my collection and collecting, I've gone on and off with collecting. I think a lot of people do. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's just free time. You don't have it. Even in the last month, I've been slow to read and things like that. But it started as a kid. X-Men was kind of what got me into it. Mid 90s or early 90s when X-Men did Volume 2. And coincided with the new TV show, the cartoon, which was my Saturday morning everything. And so I really got into that. Spawn a little bit. I kind of got into Spawn. I had some friends who were really into Spawn. Me, it was at the time maybe a little too dark. I was still more interested in the cartoons that I saw on TV. So X-Men was my thing, and a little bit of Spider-Man. And then I stopped collecting. I stopped collecting, I should say, comics. I started collecting like basketball cards. Okay. More friends were doing that. So that's what I moved into. And then high school hit and I fell completely out of collecting altogether, mostly because of girls, because they didn't want to talk about collecting, so neither did I. And then, went to school, college, got married, all of those details. And I kind of in and out throughout. I would always, if I saw a comic book store, I'd walk in it just to see what was going on. And I would say 2009-ish. It was before the first Captain America movie. I knew it was coming, but I'd already started kind of getting the bug again. The MCU was really in its infancy. Nobody knew what it was going to become. I certainly didn't even know that there would be an Avengers movie, but I knew they were doing a Captain America movie, and they had done Iron Man and Hulk. So I decided to go out and find. I wanted the first Captain America, but once you start going through the history, you're like, okay, the first Captain America is not obtainable because it's from the Golden Age and it's extremely expensive. So then I started looking for what I consider to be like the next best thing. I settled on, from an affordability standpoint at that time, a Captain America 101. I found an affordable copy on eBay. No, that one wasn't eBay. I'm sorry. I got that one at an LCS. I got that Captain America 101, and it was a decent one. I never had it graded. It was a raw copy I bought. And it ended up being the first book I ever got graded myself from CGC. And it ended up being a 5.5. I think I got it for like $35 or something like that in 2009. It was considered a real low grade copy. So they sold it to me for pretty cheap, even then. And then I wanted a CGC book even then. So I wanted another Captain America. And so I got Captain America 109, I believe. That's the famous Kirby cover where he's busting through. It's the origin of Captain America. He's busting through, busting through the newspaper. And I loved the cover. So I got that, and I got that in 8.5 white pages. Essentially, I bought that on eBay, and I just found the highest grade that I could find on eBay in that cover because I just wanted it. That was one of those things where I wasn't looking for first appearance at that point. I literally just wanted that cover, so that's what I got. And 8.5 I found one that I considered reasonably priced, and I think it was still under $100. And 8.5, and I didn't even know, honestly, what white pages were at that point, but because when I collected, I just collected to read most of the time. That first Captain America book, I flipped through it. I guess you could say I read it. I read most of it, but I was very gentle with it. So anyway, and then I got really into New 52. When DC did New 52, that's when I went headfirst into reading. And I read Batman New 52. Scott Snyder was my absolute favorite. I read the whole run. I have the run. And it's still one of my favorite runs ever in comic books. Now, that is, I haven't read everything, so it's hard to say that it's my absolute favorite, but I will always recommend that to somebody if they want to read a superhero book. I'm like, Batman New 52, read the run. Especially for me, the first 20 outside of issue 12, which is essentially throwaway. But
the whole Court of Owls. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Court of Owls. Absolutely.
Yep. So, and I tried out a lot of the other New 52 because I liked Batman so much. So I branched out and I looked at some of I got to admit, I didn't like any Superman at all. But Aquaman was good for the first 10 issues. I want to say it was all right. It was interesting for sure. And then Scott Steiner on Swamp Thing. That was great. It's so good, underrated. Nobody read it. It seems
the Green.
What's that? Green Lantern?
With the Green? No, in Swamp Thing, right? The Green.
Oh yes. I'm sorry. I thought you're Green Lantern. So I
am a Green Lantern.
Yeah. Yep. Did you like the New 52 take?
I did. It's funny because overall I like the new 52, but it was created wrong, the whole 52 concept, because it was like some characters started over again, some characters didn't. Then they said, okay, you know what? No character is older than no character's been a hero for more than 5 years. But then if Batman's been only been a hero for 5 years, how does he have 5 Robins already?
Yeah.
So,
I'm not.
so
Yeah.
it was flawed in some ways, but
there were flaws. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
But I really didn't hang on to any of the other New 52 as long as I did Batman. I really just got really focused just on Batman for a while. And then I branched out into what else was Scott Snyder doing. So then I read American Vampire and just blew my mind. And I was like, this is what comics can be. And then it really started branching me out into Lock and Key, Preacher. I started reading a lot. Then I started getting into kind of the darker horror stuff, which has become my favorite stuff to read ultimately. So I'm trying to think. So yeah, Lock and Key was really good. Nailbiter. I loved Nailbiter. And so then I really just got into trades because by the time I was figuring out what books I wanted to read, they were already out. So I wasn't doing month by month at that point. Then gosh, I did that for a few years. I was fairly consistent, I guess, but then I fell off again. And that led to, I guess it would have been last fall. Now up till this point, everything I bought, except for those 2 Captain America books, everything was just for reading purposes. Okay. I didn't really own any collectibles. I wasn't collecting to sell. I was just reading for entertainment. And then last fall, I don't know what kind of, last fall is not necessarily, last fall I started collecting. I started reading again because of Something is Killing the Children. And I guess you could say that started not last fall, but the previous winter, 2020. I'm trying to think what the date was on that first book.
Yeah, because all February happened in the middle of that, right?
Yeah. I got in early enough on Something is Killing the Children because I got almost every issue off the shelf, off the rack, except for number 1. I did not get that off the rack. Well, I guess I didn't get it off the rack price, I should say. Yeah, exactly. I did get it.
Funny you say that because I found it in my local comic book shop. It was the last issue that was there. Issue number 1. It was the last one on the shelf that I got.
Yes, and I got it from my local comic shop, but at that point they were like, that's not cover price anymore. But I still got it very, very reasonably, and I was happy about that. But all the other covers, right? I got in early enough to really get all the covers, right. And the only one actually I think I'm missing is number 7. I'd have to go back and double check that. I think I have a second print of number 7 because that month I missed going to the LCS, and I didn't bother buying it online. So, but the last fall I decided, man, I started looking at some of the books, and then I started feeling like I was missing out on, man, I never did go back and buy all my favorite X-Men books. Then you start realizing I really want those X-Men books. And then you start looking and you're like, oh, and then there's just, oh, that's a cool cover. Oh, I remember that. Or you just start diving in and then suddenly you're buying, CGC slabs left and right. And you're, right. I found because of a new job that I got last fall, I ended up finding a new comic shop that was near there. And that comic shop turned out to be the best honey hole I ever found.
Yeah.
And the owner and I get along really well. And, that's part of, I posted on Instagram today about a book. I walked in there and he was like, hey, I got these. You said you wanted one of, this cover. And I was, so it's just, once you get to know your LCS owner like that, yeah, I never have any reason to change.
Yeah,
so,
mine's the same way. Like, he'll he'll grab like incentive covers, he'll put them in my box, and he says to me, look, if you don't want it, just put it back on the shelf, Like, but he'll, he knows that a lot of times I'll buy the incentive covers and things like that. So
Yep.
having a good LCS goes such a long way.
Yeah, and I don't there's a lot of people that are foregoing the LCS and they're just buying direct online from some supplier, somebody that they know is going to have the inventory and they can buy 10 covers of whatever they want at cover price or even discounted. And I think that's great, especially for the people that buy in bulk. Most of the books that I read on a monthly basis, I buy 1, maybe 2 copies if if it's a hyped up name or something like that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't blame anybody who wants to buy in bulk online, but I would argue if you can find a good LCS where they're willing to be a little bit more personal, willing to go a little bit of the extra mile, and they're not all like that. I've been into other ones, they don't mind if you have a pull list, but they're not going to get to know you, or their prices are just too high. And I love LCSs and I try to support. I go to 3 or 4 of them around here fairly regularly just to try and give everybody business. But in general, there's a couple of them I've gone into that I don't go back to because it's just, the environment's not conducive to the way I like to buy. So
right. Absolutely.
But anyway, so that's my origin story. You asked for it, so I gave it to you. It's a little long.
No, and I appreciate it. And I think your story is probably a lot of people will identify with that, because I think a lot of people start when they're young, they read things, and then what I like to say is, and then life happens, and so they kind of fall away from it for a while, and then, a lot of them come back to it later on. Not that life is over, but they find that their life is in a different place now where they can come back to it. So.
Yeah, no, and I guess, it's been an interesting journey when I've started intermixing reading and collecting or speculating, which, brings me to what I wrote up here, which is spec what you read, or you could say spec what you've read. One of the things that I've found has been very, very fun is I just go back and read some of the books. I went back and have read a lot of old comics that I hadn't read before. So I'm still working my way through, for example, Werewolf by Night. But I've already found, you just read the run of Werewolf by Night, and Moon Knight's in there, but there's a lot of other good characters in that series that you could sit there and be like, oh, I could see how the MCU could bring that person in, or I could see how that character could become influential or important down the road. And it's just, it's not, Disney and Marvel aren't just throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing which character it sticks to. They're strategically doing it, and they're pulling stuff from the comics, for sure. So instead of, trying to read all the tea leaves, because you could watch like the Loki episodes and pull out every little Easter egg, which they're there. And there's a lot of people way smarter than I am who can find them. I can tell you, I watch the Loki episodes. Most of the time I'm too enamored with the story that's going on that I miss a lot of Easter eggs right away. But I can say that, if you can base speculation in something you've read, it seems to me that it's worth its weight in gold, because that spec can hold really true. And if not, you had fairly good logic behind getting the book you wanted. So, and not to mention, if you've read it and you enjoy it, you will never be sad if you get stuck with it. Kind of, if you're looking to spec to sell, but you like what you read, you're not going to be mad that you have that book now if somebody doesn't buy it from you in the future. But so that's why I like to read as much as I can. I wish I read more. I just don't have the time, to be honest. So
no, I hear you. So now your Instagram, you are a self-proclaimed conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
How did that whole thing come about, and what made you choose Omega Red for your?
Well, I will say self-proclaimed comic book conspiracy theorist.
Good point.
While I'm happy to sit and speculate whether the moon landing is real or was real or not, I most of the time the comic book conspiracy theorist was actually just something funny that kind of fell out of a conversation I was having with a friend, Automatic Comics, who I've been BSing with via Instagram chat for, I don't know, since I bought a book from him in December. I bought a book from him, and we just kept talking, and ultimately it just became a friendship, and we BS back and forth. But I believe the name fell out of just that because I kept coming to him before I even had an Instagram account. Sorry, the comment pronounced Reed. Yeah, thank you very much, Jesus. That's Guaranteed Comics right there. Good guy, but he needs to learn how to pronounce words. No, he's doing that just to goat me. Anyway, the name, then I just kept coming to him with all these ideas like, oh man, don't you think this book should be doing better? Because I think, you could look and read the comics, and if you read it and it says this character does that with that character, you put those pieces together and you have a spec for a comic book that could blow up. And it just ended up, I don't know, somewhere it just fell out that the way I build specs is just through conspiracy theories for the MCU and what they're going to pull out next. But as far as Omega Red, the name, I'm a huge X-Men fan. I like the X-Men books, but I really do like, there's a lot of nostalgia tied up with the 90s TV show and the toys that came along with it. And Omega Red was my favorite villain. The comics, the toys. I loved the toy figure. I actually don't have one. I've been meaning to get one. They make a lot of really great Omega Red figures. And so I wanted to tie my Instagram and my name to the nostalgia, to the, why I got into comics in the first place. So, and I generally like the darker characters. I like a lot of the villains. I enjoy a very good villain. If somebody can be compelling, I get drawn to them. So, let me reach out here and get something real fast. So I decided I came up with the idea of Omega Red because reading was also a big part. I wanted to talk about books that I had read and what I thought, not necessarily recommendations. My intent was never to review all the books that were being released, but I wanted to talk to people, and post about things that I was reading that I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. So the idea of, having read the book. And then the other idea that a lot of my speculation falls out of books that I've read. And so then I just kind of put the two and two together and Omega Red. And I thought it was a clever play on words, but for the most part, most people see it and they pronounce it Omega Reed. I get that all the time. It's fine. It's really not a big deal because honestly, if they're talking about me, then that's, I guess, good news. But I was going to say, so one of the first books when I decided to really start collecting, and I knew I was going to do the account. I knew what I was going to name the account. I was like, all right, it's about time that I, sit down and grab a 9/8 copy, newsstand, white pages copy of, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to do it right. There we go. So 9.8 newsstand copy of X-Men 4. This is the first appearance of Omega Red. So this was one of the first things I had to get. It made sense from a collection standpoint. One of my favorite characters. It made sense for Instagram because I would be using the name. And I really wanted to make sure that it was the first comic book posted on my account. So if you scroll all the way back, that is the first book I ever posted about. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I got the name. And what's the reasoning behind the books that I post. I generally will post, if I'm posting about a spec book or I'm posting, it's usually a book that I really like, that I read or have always wanted, all those kind of details. I really try to bring a lot of that aspect to what I'm talking about.
Right. And you have some regular themes that kind of run through a lot of your posts. You do some of the number crunching on certain things. You post what you read this week. And I really love the Desert Island Club that you do.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. How did that come about?
Well, that one came. So when I first started the account, read this week, number crunch, and comic book conspiracy theory were the three kind of themed posts that I was going to do. The conspiracy theories, just to break down what those are, is essentially, if I post a comic book conspiracy theory, it's usually something that's a little out there, right? I'm not going to necessarily be that's a comic book conspiracy theory is not based on not generally based on what was in the most recent episode of Loki or something like that. One of the ones that actually did really well, a lot of people liked it, I got a lot of feedback off of it, was I posted about Onslaught. And if you go back into the comic books, you can look at we know the MCU is bringing in the X-Men. We know the MCU is bringing the Fantastic Four. We know we've already got the Avengers, of course, in some capacity or another. And there's a lot of spec already out there that when it comes to the Fantastic Four, they'll probably bring in Franklin Richards, the son of Sue Richards, and the like Adam Warlock, and there's a bunch of other characters people are specking on or already in or announced. And all of if you go into the comics and you really try to break down, and I tried as hard as I could to find any other villain that matched this, what villain did all of those characters have to fight together? Who did it take all of the X-Men, all of the Avengers, all of the Fantastic Four, and Franklin Richards and the Guardian? Like, who did they all have to fight to win? Like, what epic storyline brought them all together? Onslaught did. Onslaught brought everything. So it was, reading the comics, saying, I think this could be fun. This could be something where they're going. Now, they're not going to do this in the next 5 years. Right? I don't think they can pull. It doesn't sound to me like they would pull all of that together in the next 5 years, but maybe Onslaught is coming in the next 8 to 10 years. I don't know. That's why it's a comic book conspiracy theory, because it's so far out that it's just fun to speculate. So
it is, and it's also fun to read too. So
yeah. I think it's trying to piece it all together and trying to find if there are other villains out there doing the same thing. That fought all of these heroes. So that's comic books conspiracy theory. Number crunch is where I try to look at and make comparisons between either two books, one that I think is undervalued and one that is kind of what this book could become. Most of the time it's usually just focusing on one specific book and trying to draw out where that book could be headed. So one of the first number crunch posts that I did way back when I started the account, I think it was in late February. It was for Marvel Special Edition 15, the first Shang-Chi, which let me go ahead and just grab that because I have it. So this is a 9/8, white pages copy. It's a really nice, clean copy. I love this book, the black cover. I will not act like I read Special Marvel Edition or the Shang-Chi books prior to getting excited about the movie. But I will say that the movie plus the comic collecting And just me wanting to know more about the character did push me into reading the books. Now, again, Shang-Chi, it's not a long run. It's 110, 115 books, something like that, or issues. So I'm not all the way through, but I have got through, I think I'm in the 50s. And I get these digitally. You can get collections. When I'm doing big collections like that, I know a lot of people get omnibuses or things like that. I just don't have the storage space for that many physical books. So for those big long runs like that, I tend to get them digitally, and then I read them on my iPad. But so I did it when this book in February, when I did this post, an 8.5 in that book. I remember passing up in February on an 8.5 that was selling for like $530. Wow. And I remember thinking, what, do people know that the movie is coming? Like, this is, what's going on here? And I did, the whole post was it number crunch. So I compared that book to Blade. I drew, they were essentially printed in the same, the first Blade, Tomb of Dracula 10, printed in the same year. They both launched the starts of, two major characters that are going to be in the MCU, and one sooner than the other, apparently. And then, in addition to that, I was trying to think, what were all the other So drawing out, then if you also look at the CGC census, you're going to find that very similar numbers, right? They're both, they were both I think they were like 2,300 at the time, total submissions to CGC for the first Blade and the first Shang-Chi. And they were very comparable books. But the Blade book at an 8.5 at that same time was selling for more than double than what the first Shang-Chi was. Now, the Blade book had the benefit of Blade has already had a trilogy. Now, it wasn't MCU related, and that trilogy is now almost 20 years done. I think the third Blade was 2004 or something along those lines. But that said, Blade has kind of a built-in fan base already because of the previous movies that people saw. And so the book probably had started it off a little bit higher when both Blade and Shang-Chi were announced for the MCU, which were, I believe, simultaneously. Blade and Shang-Chi were announced at the same time. But for me, I was basically suggesting look at the first Blade, Tomb of Dracula 10, as a benchmark that you can trust Blade or the first Shang-Chi to get to, right? Because Blade had a little bit of a head start because of the previous series. However, Shang-Chi as a character is going to get his own trilogy, right? I can't imagine this is going to be a one-off movie. Right. The trailers look amazing. The hype is real. Everybody's going nuts over the trailers with Abomination and all these people already in it. They're tying it into the MCU really well. And I feel like it's going to be a very popular character very soon. Right. And when that happens, you're going to see Shang-Chi catch Blade in terms of first appearance and popularity. Not to mention, Shang-Chi will be the first Asian American superhero. Right. So, we're going to catch, that's going to catch a lot too. So Number Crunch basically broke down and said there's a lot of value here that people may not be seeing yet. And I think people, if you have the means, jump on the book. So there's that. And then Read This Week is simply what I read over the last week or weeks or ever, in between the last time I've done it. I'm actually a little late on those right now. I need to catch up, but to be honest, I've been so busy. I haven't had a chance to really read recently. No. So to get to what your actual question was, Desert Island and how that fell out. I got really, really into this community. The Instagram community, the comic community is actually really, really great people want to talk, people invite you to just chat, and you get into, speculation, BS conversations just on Instagram chat. And it's a lot of fun. And I just realized that I wanted to do more to generate conversation just within the community, where it's not just me saying, hey, these are books I think you should read, or hey, these are specs I think you should look at, where it's all me. And I thought it would be a lot of fun to turn that around and just start asking people, if you could only have one book, no value, like it doesn't matter what the value of the book is. It doesn't matter, you can read it. It doesn't have to be encased. Like it doesn't, you could pick Hulk #1 if that's really what you wanted to have to read over and over and over again, because you're stranded on a desert island. And so what book is it going to be? And I posed that question to different people on Instagram, and I want to post their stories, just kind of generate more conversation and just kind of make it interesting, because I am also, with the ones I've done so far, I'm super intrigued by what people pick and why. And some people do it because of nostalgia. Some people have done it just from sheer readability for the book. Other people have done it because of the history behind the book, and how that would feed more thought, on the island, so to speak. So, like I said, everybody has their own reasons, and that's what makes it so interesting. So
yeah, and that's what makes collecting so much fun, because to your point, I mean, people may collect a particular comic because of it reminds them of their childhood, or people may collect a particular hero because of something that they read 20 years ago and it spoke to them, and so they're still collecting it. So there's many different stories collecting comic books as there are comic books, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You won't be at a loss. That's for sure.
It's funny because you started before you started talking about
I talk a lot, but you're gonna have to.
That's okay. No, that's good. That's good. You talked about the moon landing, and we'll leave that to the Department of Truth, I think, probably.
Yeah,
they'll probably get to that eventually.
Which is a great series for sure. I love that series.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to read The Nice House on the Lake issue 2 yet, or no?
No, I do have that, and I will admit, on the stack of all the books I still need to read, I did put that one on the top because that one is probably the one I'm most interested to read first. Okay.
Yeah, so. I've read it twice already.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Worth reading?
Yeah, I won't spoil it, but the thing that stuck out to me about that is this seems to be the most indie type issue that DC has ever done of one of James Tynion's work. I think they're trying to replicate Something Is Killing the Children. And what I mean by it's like it is, there's a couple of pages, then there's a double page spread with the title, and then it's all pages with all the ads in the back, just like you find in the indies. DC never does that.
No,
but the indies do that all the time.
The first Joker, I think Joker's still going, right? I might have missed an issue. I was all caught up through 4, but the Joker #1, I remember reading that and liking the story. It's Tynion, it's well written, right. But I couldn't stand that every other page I flipped was an advertisement for another DC series, or I was, get the ads out of the way, put them at the back or something. Mm-hmm. Let me just read the comic, which is one of the best parts about the indies, is you don't have to deal with the ads, right. For the most part. So, and I think it hurt the reading of that book for sure.
Right. So yes, again, I won't ruin the no spoilers. But structurally, it is most like an indie comic that DC has ever done, I think.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think that you're probably right. They may be trying to capture some of the magic that Something Is Killing the Children really did for Boom. Right. But an Image got him for Department of Truth. Like, I don't know how this guy has time to write all this stuff. Because you'd think that one of them he would just mail in, but he doesn't. Like, he's so good. And I don't understand how somebody is capable of being that talented, but I guess that's why he's doing it, not me.
And he's writing Batman, and he's writing
Yeah,
Wind, and and they're heading into the big Fear State and Batman.
yeah,
So that's a huge undertaking that's going to go on as well, because there are some one shots going on there too, and so it's almost like there must be like three of them.
yeah. I don't. Yeah,
They're all
he's
writing under his name.
yeah. The three of them. I don't know. Yeah, that would make sense. That's the only way I could see. Or the guy just doesn't sleep. He lives on caffeine or coffee or you name it. He's doing something to stay awake a lot of hours of the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's just some quick shots. Favorite superhero.
Batman. First
Okay.
one that came to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I know your favorite supervillain. You already mentioned it. I'm gonna go with Omega Red. Is that?
Yeah, that's
Would that be right?
accurate. Yep,
Okay.
he'd be the first one I'd choose. Yep.
Okay. I think I may have just scratched the surface on favorite writer.
I I'm gonna have to go with probably Scott Snyder because of body of work total. I just he's almost perfect for me as far as I haven't read anything that he's done that I hate. I haven't read anything of Tynion that I hate. I also recently really love Maxwell Prince. I think that guy is a brilliant writer. And he's Haha and Ice Cream Man.
Yep.
And those two books alone are, just mind-blowingly good. And they're also way different. Nobody is writing anything like that. I think that there are people trying to recreate what the Scott Snyders and the Tynion are doing, but I don't know people that are able to write anything like what Maxwell Prince is doing on a regular basis. So I'd probably say Scott Snyder, but I would probably say I'd pick Maxwell Prince over Tynion just from a unique standpoint. The guy makes me think every time I read his work.
And Tynion is a Scott Snyder's protege, right?
Yes, he is, which makes a lot of sense.
Right, exactly. Favorite comic book story?
You mean like a run?
Yeah.
Court of Owls. Court of Owls. I recently reread that again for like the 8th time, I think, at least, and it's almost flawless. How do you add a new villain to a superhero who already has the most iconic lineup of villains? I mean, there's a lot of great villains out there, and there's a lot of heroes that have. I mean, Batman is maybe at first or 1A to Spider-Man. Maybe is there any other superhero that you think has a lineup? Right, like Doctor Doom is epically good, but after that, do the Fantastic? I mean, they have Galactus, but total lineup, Batman has.
Yeah,
the best lineup of villains.
I might put Flash up there too. He's got the Rogue Gallery. But I think I would still go with Batman for their iconicness, if that's a word.
Yeah. Sheer recognizability. They are just so recognizable.
Right.
And you know what? TV shows and the movies have all helped that. But man, they're so unique. And of course, Omega Red is my favorite villain, but the Joker to me is the greatest villain ever written.
Mm-hmm.
The Killing Joke, there are too many good stories with the Joker, but there isn't a better villain out there than the Joker. Me personally, Omega Red is just kind of an obsession from childhood kind of thing. That's why I like him. So,
and the thing with Court of Owls too, the thing that was interesting to me is when I read it, I thought to myself, I mean, it was just fantastic, but I thought to myself, how did nobody else think of this before? I mean, the owl.
I think that's what makes it perfect.
Exactly, the owl is the natural enemy
predator.
Of the bat.
Yes,
and the predator of the bat. It's kind of like when Jeff Johns did the Green Lantern and created all those other color spectrums. It's like, how did nobody else think to create all these other color
Jeff Johns is another one of those fantastic writers. He's doing Geiger right now, and he's killing it on Geiger as well. So, but you're right. And the thing about the Court of Owls was they tied it to the city of Gotham, the history of Gotham,
right?
And they made it. Scott Snyder built it so that the Court of Owls weren't new; they were always there.
Mm-hmm.
Batman just didn't know it. And I think that's what's amazing is that they kind of, tied it into, which at the time, everybody was, if you remember, what was that, 2011 or 12, that was when the Illuminati, everybody was talking about it. And,
right.
All the conspiracy theories, and the Court of Owls just kind of played into everybody's fear of, one group of people controlling, the entire city or the world, and that's what the Court of Owls kind of were, and they've always been there. And it's just kind of it was a fun story that, like you said, was just so obvious. And it was just so obvious. You were like, how did nobody think of this? How long have they been writing Batman and they didn't think of a clever owl? I'm sure it came up. There was probably an owl man somewhere on which was funny because Alan Moore had the Night Owl,
right? Yep.
And for the Watchmen, and he was the Batman-esque character in the Watchmen, which I always thought was kind of a clever turn on Batman, being the Bat, and then Night Owl being the Predator. But anyway, what else you got?
Okay, you have a person who's never read a comic before. What one comic issue would you give them to introduce them to comics?
Well, wait a minute. What age is this individual?
Well, let's say he's your age.
Okay. So that's the hardest thing for me, because I'm always going to say, well, I'm going to tailor it to that specific person. Now,
sure.
If it's somebody who I know has a really great sense of humor, if they've never read comics before, then I would probably go with never read comics. I still think I'd go with Batman New 52 #1. Okay. Because if you've never read comics, I don't know if introducing them or offering them something like the first issue of American Vampire would work all that well. Maybe they're not a horror. So if somebody that I know that, for you, for example, right? So you're avid comic reader. If somebody was an avid comic reader, but they wanted me to recommend one book that they are like, give me something I've not read, Airboy #1.
There you go.
Which
is a great read, by the way.
Airboy #1 from what year was that? 2014. I'm trying to think when that run was, or maybe it was 2016, somewhere in there. By what was it? Richard.
James
what was
Robinson.
Robinson. Yes, thank you. James Robinson was the writer. And if you've read comics and you get comics, but you have not read Airboy, there's only 4 issues, 1 through 4. Read those. You probably haven't read them, but you will be glad you did, because they are the most, I don't know, how would you describe it? It's just, it's for readers, though. People who read comic books will like it.
Yeah.
But it is
and
pretty
I think
depraved.
if you know a little bit about the history of James Robinson too, you can enjoy it even more.
I agree. But I will say, they give you a little bit of that history within the. They give you enough of that backstory in the book itself. But it's just it was so much fun, and I still have yet to run into somebody that has also read it. I read it, I loved it, and then I tell other people to read it because it's just what I think I want them to enjoy. But if somebody they're not a comic book person at all, the New 52 #1, you could potentially go back and say Watchmen, read the graphic novel, because that's it just wonderful storytelling. The Killing Joke is another one of my favorites. So yeah, we'll go with those for the, I lean into the DC side for those, which is surprising because I actually really like old Marvel. I don't like a lot of new Marvel. I've not found a lot of new Marvel I like to read, and I don't mean insult to it. It's just not for me.
Yeah. Marvel is something that I really am trying to expand my knowledge about because I grew up DC. I was almost 100% DC growing up, and it's something that I'm trying to bone up on my Marvel knowledge, and I'm getting my some of my Marvel keys and everything. So this is kind of just like now that I read it, it's kind of just like Stranded on a Desert Island. I was gonna say, when you die, what's the one comic that you want buried with you, that you don't want to give to your kids, that you want buried with you to take with you?
Well, it depends, because if they figure out the value of these books, they're not going to care if they bury them with me or not. Give me a second. Let me see what I can find. I've got a whole box over here. I'm trying to think through the ones that I love so much. Okay, well, it might be the cheesy answer. Or the easy answer, but I think for the buried with the book, don't want to give it up. Mostly all based around nostalgia and love of the characters that are introduced in it. I am going to go with Giant Size X-Men #1. This is my 6.0 White Pages copy. When I officially kicked off my collecting ways, when I officially said I will be collecting and I am going to get myself that one book that I always wanted. It was always on a list, and it was something where I used to see the price and go, no, I'm not going to pay that for that book. But I always wanted it. So I got this in January. And I remember effectively like 2 weeks after I got the book, I got it on Shortboxed. There might be an ED on there. I can't remember. I got it, and 2 weeks after I got it, I saw another 6.0 White Pages, I believe, sold on eBay for $1,000 more than I paid. And I was like, oh, I dodged a bullet there, because after that happens, nobody's going to come back down on their price.
Right.
So I got lucky, but this wasn't a spec thing. It wasn't a, hey, I can make a bunch of money off that. If I was doing that, I would have already sold it already, because it's really peaked. I think it'll potentially still go up, but that is really just, that's a book that a lot of people, for them, X-Men #1 or Fantastic Four #1 or Amazing Fantasy 15, those are their holy grails, for characters. And honestly, for me, this was just as much of a blue chip book as those. And I still believe that it's just as much of a blue chip book as those. And I think it'll get, I don't know if it'll ever catch, but I think that it deserves that kind of recognition. But again, most of my opinion is based around growing up as a kid and idolizing a lot of characters that fell out of the cartoon series I was watching and the comics I was reading. Wolverine is still, Hulk 181 is always going to be on my list until I finally get one. But it continues to move out of that price range. I do think someday I'll probably end up with one. I'll bite the bullet and pay more than I want to, kind of like I did with this Giant Size X-Men. Pay more than I want, but still get the book I've always wanted. And there, that's the thing, is I've got books that I can turn into that book if I really want to, right? You sell 3 to 5 books, suddenly you have enough to get yourself a Hulk 181 or, what other grail you really want. But for me, Giant Size X-Men is the book that I have in my collection that isn't going anywhere. it won't be sold, and ultimately the only way that is probably going to end up getting sold is if it doesn't go in my coffin and my kids end up selling it to pay for the coffin, probably.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I hope Kevin's watching. Two, because I know he's been.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if he had
Like,
found one yet or not. I haven't
yeah.
talked to him recently.
Yeah. Two, I think you're right. I mean, I think that book will get another bump when Disney announces a new X-Men movie. But that's one of those books. I mean, you have some books that kind of get an artificial bump because something happens, but then it comes back down. Once the hype is over. That's one of those books that it's never going to come back down. Yeah, it may go up and down a little bit, but it's gonna the trajectory is always going to be up.
I think it's a steady trajectory, constantly up, and I think it's really just because of all the characters that you see in there and that are introduced. It's just an iconic blue chip book. I don't know how else to describe it.
That describes it perfectly. So we're coming up on an hour, but I also wanted to ask you about. You have a new thing that you're going to be doing pretty soon, I think.
Yeah,
a podcast. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've got to sit down and record. Jesus from Guaranteed Comics, him and I have been friends now for quite a while. I got on Instagram and I started chatting with him, and we just got back and forth. And it just kind of, we started talking to each other, and then we started calling back and forth, and then we'd be like, man, we should really be recording these conversations because we're just sitting here spitballing speculation and what have you. And, just talking about conversations about, what do you think about this? And, why do you think that happened? And then we just started saying, instead of saying we should be recording, we started saying, this is the show. This conversation, this is the show we should start. So we are in the process of getting it going. We've done a test to record and converse and try to figure out. We've started building like an intro and things like that. The title of it is Spec Tales, a comic book podcast. We have started an Instagram page for it, just spec_tales_podcast. And the title kind of fell out of both of our love for horror stories, horror comics, and Tales from the Crypt.
Mm-hmm.
And then speculation, the comic book conspiracy theory stuff, the idea that, half of the fun of comic books is turned into just sitting there chatting with your friend about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this happened or something like that. And then a spec falling out of that conversation, you're like, oh man, we should really go and find that book. And so that just the fun conversations. So that's kind of what the podcast will be. We'll try to tailor it so that I don't meander, because if you let me, I will talk for a long time. So we'll tailor it with some topics. And we'll bring in different ideas. We might bring in, the Read This Week, where I can kind of talk about some of the books that I'm reading. And, the thing about Read This Week is those books aren't always the modern books. I do a lot of those, what I'm reading from that week's pull list. But like, I'll go back and talk about, Kraven's Last Hunt or something like that. I recently read the whole run. And God, that's such a good run. Holy crap, that's really good. So that's kind of what it'll be about. And we'll tend to focus on current topics, and, kind of, and then the whole, tales, the stories, every comic book has a story. Every comic book collector has a story about each comic book that they did collect. And so I guess you could say, we may take Spec Tales a little literally. Yes, thanks again, Jesus, for throwing out another wrong statement. But let's not go into Kraven's casting because we don't have enough time for that.
Were you gunning for Keanu? Is that where you?
It wasn't about who they didn't choose more than it's about who they did choose.
Okay.
And there were there were castings. One was announced, one is speculation, but Craven was officially announced who they cast, and then about a week after that, there was the the leak about who Disney was casting as Namor for the Submariner.
Right.
And I basically was saying that Disney literally could do a clinic on how to do good casting, and Sony needs to attend the clinic because they're terrible at it. And I feel like if Marvel hadn't been involved in the casting of Tom Holland as Spider-Man himself, Sony would have probably dropped the ball on that too. But no, I don't think it was smart for Sony to cast somebody that's already been dead in the MCU, because that makes a crossover with the MCU really difficult when you're using a character that's or an actor that's already been, and then you're trying to cross over. And then now you got me talking about Jesus. Thanks for nothing. I don't want to talk about how angry I am with Sony over this silly casting. Either way, I don't like it. I also don't think he looks anything like what Craven should look like. He's not age appropriate. Now, granted, that said, we don't actually know what they're going to do. Maybe they cast him perfectly for the story that they have scripted. I'm just saying, knee-jerk reaction, I think it was really bad.
That's fair. Okay, we're just over an hour now. I just want to, again, thank you so much, for coming on. We didn't get to half the stuff that I want to get to, so hopefully you'll come back sometime.
I have too much wind. You have to either turn me off or just shut my mic off.
No, not at all.
So, but I had a ton of fun. I really do appreciate you having me on and just getting a chance to chat. I wish next time we would talk more about you as well, because I'm still learning about your collection as well. But maybe we're a little overdue for a Desert Island post from you. So we'll talk about that.
Absolutely. If you're watching this live, thank you. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, whether you're watching it live or on the rewind, and make sure you hit the notification button. Again, one last time, thank you to Jake Omega Red. His information is in the description of the video, but it's right there, Omega Red. And my name is Paul Cook, and you are now leaving Sector 2815. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, everybody.